Cougar Tracks podcast from Frisco, Texas, side of the Big 12 football media days. Day one is complete. BYU took center stage here at the Star, home of the Dallas Cowboys practice facility. Going to unpack all of my thoughts from day one, some insider observation, news and notes from here in Frisco, and update on BYU's quarterback situation, the latest with the football team heading into the 2025 season. I'll also give you my Big 12 football preseason poll. If there was a 1 to 16 poll, this is what it would have been that I would have submitted to the Big 12. I'll share that in this episode, and then also break down some commentary from Brett Yormark in his State of the Conference address here at the Star. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, X, at Mitch_Harper. Follow KSL Sports on all of the socials, at KSL Sports. You can watch, listen, subscribe to this podcast on the KSL Sports app, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Pocket Cast. It's always available. Subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, give a thumbs up to this video if you're watching on YouTube, and subscribe to the KSL Sports YouTube channel. Would really appreciate that. So you can see all of these videos for Cougar Tracks. There's going to be a lot of them coming up this football season. Rest assured, you're going to see a lot of my face this BYU football season, so that's a little bit of a tease of what lies ahead for the upcoming season. But Big 12 Media Days, day one, 8 teams went through the car wash, BYU being one of those teams. And Kalani Sitake was the first head coach on the main stage right after Brett Yormark had his State of the Conference address. It was head coach Kalani Sitake, and it already feels like a year ago from that address, the whirlwind that is media days at times. But Kalani was asked point blank if Jake is with the team right now. Kalani danced around that, said we thank Jake, and we're going to let him issue a statement. No comment again from BYU on the matter. So they're going to let Jake and his team issue the response. Now, it's been reported, of course, that Jake plans to enter the transfer portal. He's still not in there. And one thing that's been interesting with the Jake Retzlaff transfer portal reports is that I think people forget that, the deadline to enter for the 2025 season was a hard date for anyone in April. July 1st starts the new portal window, but that's for the 2026 season. Not window, I shouldn't say that, but the new cycle of when people can say, I'm going to go in the portal. Anyone can say they're going to declare or enter the portal, especially, graduate transfers. I know it's been noted that Jake still needs to finish up one class. I believe that was from Jay Drew of the Deseret News. But July 1st is when the cycle begins for 2026 portal activity. So I know that there's a new window for players that were expected to be cut as part of the assumed 105 roster cut down. Those players have an opportunity to go into the portal. So it's still kind of in limbo as to whether or not we actually see Jake's name enter that portal. So we're all waiting on that statement, that much-anticipated statement from Jake Retzlaff. But, talking to the players, BYU players, talking to even Kalani Sitake, they're clearly noting there's going to be a battle at the quarterback position, and they're expressing a lot of confidence in the 3 quarterbacks that are expected to compete for the job, being McKay Hillstead, Trayson Bourget, and true freshman Bear Bachmeier. No particular order there. Now, Bear Bachmeier is very interesting, and I asked Kalani Sitake about the true freshman transfer from Stanford who spent this past quarter at Stanford over the winter and competed a little bit for about 2 weeks in Stanford spring practices under Frank Reich, the interim head coach on the farm. And I asked Kalani, is Bear just an athlete? Is he just an athlete, dual threat guy that can run? Physical runner. You see some of the highlight clips, that field level view of Bear and his running ability. Is he more athlete than passer right now? And Kalani was like, no, this guy can throw the rock. And, Kalani would say, was very complimentary about the throwing ability of everyone. But, I've seen it with my own eyes. The McKay Hillstead and Trayson Bourget, they can throw the football. In increasing the accuracy, the ability to make big plays consistently, that's to be seen. And they haven't had any game action at BYU. It's just been small sample sizes in practices. But, Kalani, I think, gets this sense that he feels optimistic that this group can perform. Now, are they going to be Big 12 champions? We'll see. I mean, it's a tough ask when you consider the quality of quarterbacks in this league. I'll get to that a little bit later here in the show. But BYU feels good about, its competition heading into fall camp with McKay Hillstead, Trayson Bourget, and Bear Bachmeyer. Even Kalani Sitake noted Emerson Geilman when I spoke with him. And maybe that's a little bit of Kalani giving me the deep cuts, because I know Kalani probably expects I'm going to ask about the deep cuts in my interviews, and I did a little bit. I asked about the latest with the health and broke down the quarterbacks, and he threw in Geilman, but he mentioned it to a few interviews as well. This quarterback position is going to be key for BYU. Can this QB, whoever it ends up being, can this individual cut down the interceptions from 12 last year from Jake and maybe trim that down to 7 or 8? That could be good enough for 1 or 2 wins, maybe. You look at the projections on win-loss totals for BYU with the assumed departure of Jake Retzlaff. It's about 6.5 wins, over-under. You say maybe 6 is the floor for the next QB. 1 or 2 more wins, that's about 8. If you can take care of the football and secure that thing, I think that's kind of half the battle for this next QB, because there's pieces around the quarterback for this offense to succeed and operate at a high level. LJ Martin was here at Big 12 Media Day, quiet guy. He's finding his voice a little bit more. It's almost surreal to hear him going through these interviews, and maybe he's not as polished as, say, a Keanu Tanavasa or a Chase Roberts. But I think it was significant that he was here at Media Days, because 2 years ago, I'd hear from some players, I don't really know LJ because I just haven't heard his voice much. No one really heard him speak much. So, as someone myself who used to be petrified of public speaking, which is crazy now to think considering the line of work that I'm in, I can appreciate that. He's someone who was very young showing up at BYU. I think we forget that sometimes, that, BYU, they have true freshmen that, maybe serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints before enrolling at BYU. So they come back, they're 20 years old. And look, I'm not saying they're more mature, more physical. I'm not saying that. But from a maturity standpoint of speaking and talking and finding your voice, you tend to find it. You have to find it when you're a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. LJ, is not a member of the church. Who cares about that? That's what his personal beliefs are. That's his thing. But just kind of finding your voice among sometimes, older individuals, it can be a little bit intimidating. And, he's a guy that's going to lead by example. But I thought it was significant that he was here, and he's finding his comfort zone. I saw him playing cornhole a little bit with the Kansas Jayhawk here at the Star. Him and Keanu Tanavasa were playing with Chip, the Buffalo, and the Kansas Rock Chalk Jayhawk mascot, so that's fun. That's one of my favorite things at Big 12 Media Day is the mascots. I had lunch with Steve Bartle and Tanner Tripp, a KSL Sports producer. We were having lunch with Chip the Buffalo and Super Frog, TCU's mascot, and TCU Super Frog just puts this little, coffee creamer on our heads. I don't know what he was doing, but it was just fun. Mascots are just naturally funny. They put a smile on your face. It's one of the best parts, honestly, about Big 12 Media Day. The Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders were here. A lot of people were here. I will say the size of Big 12 Media Day feels a little bit less than compared to 2 years ago. Maybe not as media. Maybe they're getting a little more strict with who's getting credentialed to these events. It felt like a couple years ago, just anyone was getting approved, and I like that. It felt a little more intimate, a little more, like the media that's covering the league and covering college sports. They were there, and I thought that was a good thing too. Sometimes there's moments where there's a little bit of a dip in the action where you feel like, okay, where's everyone at? Where's all the players? Where are all the coaches? They're in the little break-off rooms with ESPN, with Fox, with The Athletic. They're having all these little breakout things where you get these one-on-one, meetings or commentaries or interviews with these individuals, and it's just in its own little room, and they're just chopping it up and It's kind of an intimate setting where we had that at BYU Media Days with KSL News Radio, where we'd get them in a room and just kind of privately talk, me with some players, and just kind of an intimate setting. It's a different vibe than being in this general media area that everyone's got a camera on. So, that's part of the process. So there's a little bit of waiting involved when it comes to these media days, but there's always stuff going on. You always find a way to make it work. And Brian Santiago was there. There were some BYU administrators and support staff and things like that, though. But, there wasn't a newsy Big 12 Media Day, day one. For BYU, I think what's interesting, the quarterback position is obviously going to be the big focus. But there were some little, deep cut stories that maybe kind of piqued my interest that I was asking around about the recruiting side, things like that in the league. It's a really interesting conference this year. It's always going to be that way. And, the national narrative is going to be it's just a wide-open conference. Anyone can win. I think that is the case. But, BYU, are they positioned to be, one of the powers in the league? Can they be one of the top dogs in this conference? Because I think they need it. They being the Big 12. They need some powerhouse programs to emerge. Who can become the Clemson? Who can become, eventually, an Oregon? Oregon once upon a time in the late 80s, early 90s with Ty Detmer when BYU was at BYU, Oregon was just an average, mediocre program, subpar program. They were nowhere near the level of BYU, and now Oregon is a powerhouse. BYU knocking them out in recruiting a little bit, but still, Oregon's success on the field has been remarkable over the last 20-something years. So who can be that in the Big 12 and become a two-decade, I don't want to say dynasty because Oregon hasn't won national titles, but be a program that every single year you're just like, it's Oregon. They're going to be in the mix. They're going to be knocking on the door. And who can do that in the Big 12? Because this year going in the league, it's like 1 to 10, it's splitting hairs, it feels like. And that's where you kind of go out on a limb on a team that you believe in, but really it's just like it is tough to prognosticate more than ever before. Some other things with BYU, I was asking some of the players some fun questions, kind of like the, TikTok, Instagram style, just some fun questions. I was asking, who's the most famous person in your phone contacts? One guy said Puka Nacua. There were some other good ones as well. There was one from Love Island. You'll have to see the video. Tanner Tripp will put that out here very soon. Someone mentioned a cast member from Love Island, and I'm like, Mommy? Mamacita? Love Island, just all the rage, right? But it was a fun day. It lacked, again, the newsy items. Didn't have much of that. So it's a lot of content gathering at Big 12 Media Days, and then you're building out stories over the next couple of weeks in the ramp up to BYU football fall camp, and then away we go. It's season time, and we're here, and it's go time for the 2025 football season. Fall camp going to kick off around July 29th, July 30th, somewhere in there. So about 3 weeks away till camp kicking it off. Coaches right now are on vacation, enjoying their last bit of vacation time. Kalani will get back out on some vacation, and then it's back to action here in the near future to get ready for fall camp and what's ultimately going to be a very fascinating season for this team. But I spoke with Keanu Tanavasa, spoke with Chase Roberts, Isaiah Glasker, L.J. Martin, Jack Kelly. I talked to some of those guys too about the strength and conditioning programs in the program, the new weight room, what's changed with that. Kind of got some deep stuff there with them. Also discussed their role as players when it comes to recruiting these athletes. We hear so much about the official visits in the month of June. And, the coaching staff, of course, they're going to take priority and do the photos with the players inside the stadium. But what role do the current players have with, pitching BYU to these high-profile prospects? BYU got a commitment again today. Jackson Gates, a former Syracuse commit, flips to BYU, picked BYU over Utah, Michigan State, Missouri, some heavy hitters in pursuit of Gates, and BYU lands him. What's the message from current players? And some really insightful commentary from Jack Kelly, who's like, look, coaches are going to tell these guys what they want to hear. Now, they're saying coaches are good people. BYU, he said BYU coaches are more real than most. But for the most part, when it comes to recruiting at large, they're going to say what they need to say, whereas the players are going to lay it to you straight. And he's like, we tell these guys BYU is a great place, and they kind of pitch them on BYU and why they should come. So I thought that was kind of interesting because BYU is getting into the conversation for some really high-profile guys, and they, of course, landed some key players, most notably being Ryder Lyons. Kalani was asked, too, about maintaining the commitments of these 2026 recruits, which was kind of like a little bit awkward, I thought, a little bit. I mean, I didn't mind the question. It was more like a break-off style question, not really the main stage question. So if you watched it on ESPN Plus, you probably saw it, but then Kalani's just like, yeah, that's my job. Classic Kalani. Classic Kalani. Yeah, that's my job. I got to maintain the commitments. Fair enough. I talked with Brian Santiago, BYU AD. Had to wait a little bit to get him, but I got the chance to chat with him and discuss football scheduling philosophies, his expectations for the BYU football season, why him and Tom extended Kalani Sitake, why was he the man for the job, facility upgrades, anything in the pipeline. Some interesting commentary from Brian Santiago. There's been some good stuff, too, from the KSL Sports Zone as well, and their commentary that they've had with, individuals here at Big 12 Media Days as well. So, been a lot of good stuff from the KSL Sports team at large. We got a huge group here in Frisco covering all the activities here at Big 12 Football Media Day. And one thing that was missing, though, from Big 12 Football Media Day this year is the preseason poll. And usually it's a big talking point here at Media Days. And I will admit, not having that poll kind of takes away a little bit of the newsy storyline items from this event. I'm okay with it. Like I said yesterday, I'm not opposed to not having a preseason poll. It's not necessary per se, but it is a fun item. It adds to the story of teams. It's like, okay, media got it wrong completely in a year where 8 of the 16 members are completely new, and this is a completely startup new league. Brett Yormark has noted it's a startup. So, to expect that the media was going to get that right, very difficult. But 2 years ago, got it spot on. Texas won it. Okay? So, Oklahoma State, I think, was picked 7th, which that one was off, but still, to pick the winner, that's tough to do. And you got it right 2 years ago. Last year, flipped on its head, and now there's no preseason poll. Totally fine with it. And I think I agree a little bit with Brett Yormark. As I said yesterday, I think it did hurt Arizona State from the voters, the perception of the team. So not having that branding attached to them, I think it's fine. For the teams that are maybe like a UCF and Arizona, West Virginia, not having the branding of being last place, maybe can help them a little bit. Now, granted, the last 2 years, the last place teams have been very good. 9-win West Virginia 2 years ago. Last year, of course, ASU wins the league. Brett Yormark, in his State of the Conference address, similar talking points to what he hit on at Big 12 spring business meetings, 5+11 college football playoff model. That's what he wants to see. He doubled down on that. He also focused a lot on the on-field product of Big 12 football, which was very interesting. He brought up a stat about 9 quarterbacks in the Big 12 are returning who passed for more than 2,400 yards last season. The rest of the Power Four, that's the ACC, the Big 10, the SEC, 11 combined quarterbacks in the other 3 power conferences. The Big 12's got great quarterbacks this year. It might be the best league. In fact, it probably is the best league for QB play this season. They got to live up to it, but testament to the retention, the abilities of these collectives and rev share in these programs, getting these guys to stay on board and committed to their programs. So it's a really good league from the on-field, and Brett Yormark highlighted that with the quarterback star power in the conference, because I think nationally not enough people are talking about that. The 5+11 model, again, he's doubling down on the playoff. I agree with it, but I do have trepidation about the playoff committee having that much power Brett Yormark did note that the College Football Playoff Committee and their selection process is going through a complete audit. But I feel like I've seen this sport enough to where these audits that get thrown around and give you a sliver of hope that some improved change will happen, well, it doesn't matter the system. It seems to always be similar outcomes no matter what. A 16-team playoff might not be the best thing for the Big 12 right now. That's what Yormark was talking about. But he feels long-term with the 5+11 model, that will be a positive. And I tend to agree because programs are committing more than ever financially in this league with what BYU is doing, with what Texas Tech is doing, highly resourced programs committing to football more than ever. You're seeing these coaching staffs load up. The resources committed, even though they're not making the media rights like the Big Ten and the SEC, the Big 12 is saying they want to compete at the highest levels. Brett Yormark himself even said he's expecting all of his members to be near the top in revenue sharing. So this is a highly competitive league from a financial and resources department as far as, paying back to the athletes and putting together high-profile rosters. So I thought there was, some interesting commentary from Yormark. He noted there's no better time to be in the Big 12 than now. He said that a lot. He's brought that up really since he kind of turned the corner from, getting Texas and Oklahoma an early exit and getting that settlement. That's been a popular tagline for him, and I think there's good reason to believe that. It's a more contemporary league, which I have seen. The Big 12, their subtle branding changes. It's more young. It is more hip. Their logos, the color schemes. It's not the boring red and white and black. Like, I can see it, what's happening. But I do think there's areas where they can continue to improve and, really highlight the league more than ever because you still are, at best, the third best league. And you don't have the bell cow brand like the ACC does where you have Clemson, where you have a Miami. Even though Miami hasn't won an ACC title ever, they're a brand, they're a thing. Florida State. Like, BYU's got a really good brand. I think, some of these programs in the Big 12 have good brands if you're a college football junkie, but you pull in the casual sports fan, maybe not. And what can you do to elevate the profile and the brands of these programs? I think you got to have two teams at least emerge as annual contenders, as bell cow brands of this league. I asked Brett Yormark about that, and he said he thinks it's critical for that to eventually happen in this conference because you can't continue to just be known as the deepest league in America that's got 16 teams where anyone can win it. At some point, you got to have two or three teams that kind of separate themselves from the pack, at least where you feel like, okay, it doesn't matter who's on that team. That group is going to be in the mix. Like, build up that level of cachet. Utah's got that a little bit right now because of Kyle Whittingham's longevity with that program. Oklahoma State kind of set fire to that image. They had that for a while. Last year was a complete train wreck. Utah was a mess last year too, but there were so many close games that if they had an ounce of offense, there's this feeling like they turn around this year. I think their offense is going to be better. I think the defense is not up to the level that we've grown accustomed to with Utah defenses of the past, but we shall see. That's why they play the games, which ties into my preseason poll. If there was a preseason poll, and I had a ballot at last 2 years, if they continued the preseason poll, this is how I would rank the Big 12 entering the 2025 football season. I'll start from 16 and work my way up to 1. I'll make this really quick here. 16, I'm going UCF. Look, I think Scott Frost is going to do okay. I always get leery, though, of the second time around for a guy that was great the first stint. To try to bottle up that magic again, we'll see. I think I'm very curious to see how it works out for UCF, but I'm going to put them at the bottom. UCF has struggled mightily in the Big 12. Like, they went 6-7 in year one. They had that big win over Oklahoma State. But last year, I thought UCF's been kind of that trendy team the last couple of years where it's like maybe they could be the dark horse. Nowhere near that. I'm going low on UCF this year. I'm saying 16. 15, I'm going to go with Arizona. 14, Oklahoma State. I think they could get back to a bowl game. I do. So, again, you maybe get to 14. You might have potentially, I don't know if the math works out, but I could see, 12 teams in this league being bowl eligible. I think Oklahoma State's going to be knocking on the door. I don't think they're going to be 3 wins like last season. 13, Kansas. Jalen Daniels was banged up in spring again. I'll be in believe it until I see it mode. Kansas, I know they had a 9-win season 2 years ago. Last year, tough non-conference schedule. They had Illinois, who was a really good team a season ago. They were a world beater at season's end, beating BYU, beating Colorado. But I'm going to wait and see on Kansas if they can string it along, get back to that 8-9 win threshold again. And this Jalen Daniels going to stay healthy. That's always going to be the big question. 12, Colorado. 11, West Virginia. I'm higher on West Virginia than most. The roster flip thing doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I look at that as a positive because Rich Rod's like, I'm getting my guys that fit what I want to run. I don't want to inherit something. Now, he's kind of doing that at quarterback, Nico Martial. But Nico Martial, if you watched some West Virginia games last year, I thought he was at times better. I think about the Oklahoma State game with West Virginia. He stepped in for Garrett Green, who got banged up. I think he's a pretty good QB. And maybe it's just a case I trust Rich Rod. Like the dude won at Jacksonville State. He got Arizona to a Pac-12 championship game. The dude has had moments where he wins everywhere, and he wins pretty big for all these teams. So maybe it's not going to be big winning in year one, but can they get to a bowl? Absolutely. I think West Virginia can definitely go bowling. Number 10, Houston. I like Willie Fritz a lot. I think the defense, losing the defensive coordinator to Texas Tech, that's a big loss. But, Houston's got good personnel. I think Houston and Connor Wegman coming from Texas A&M, I think that's huge out of the portal. I'm buying Willie Fritz to get to a bowl game for Houston this year. Number 9, Cincinnati. The more I dive into them, I'm very intrigued. This is, to me, you got to get to a bowl game at least. I think you got to get to 7 or 8. If you're Scott Satterfield heading into year 3, like this was once a program in the college football playoff. And it just feels like a distant memory. Cincinnati was like a juggernaut in the AAC and a legit NFL force. Like they were producing 7 or 8 guys in the 2022 NFL draft cycle. And now they're just kind of an afterthought team in the Big 12. I think this year they do go bowling. Is it, 7, 8 wins? Is that enough to keep Scott Satterfield around? Very curious to see. I mean, I think that's been a hire from the get-go that's just always kind of confused me. Because Fickle was just so good. Luke Fickle was awesome. And I think, honestly, he should have stayed at Cincinnati. It's not working out great at Wisconsin. I know the whole Big Ten thing, but, man, he could have continued to build a bully in the Big 12 at Cincinnati. I think it would have continued in this league, but, I mean, that's in the past. Now you got to, year 3 with Satterfield, time to put up and deliver. And Brendan Sorsby, the quarterback, he was here at Frisco. When you dive into him, like, such an underrated quarterback, and again, speaks to the level of QB play in this conference. Number 8, I got Utah. Devin Dampier is the preseason newcomer of the year pick. Big believer in Jason Beck and his ability to develop quarterbacks. I think Devin Dampier will be really good. Jason Beck gets a lot out of QBs, and in many respects, it's like a returning starter with how him, Devin Dampier, and Jason Beck, the lingo, the verbiage of the offense, they understand how to work off each other. I think they're going to be a pretty good offense. I do think Utah, though, defensively might have some games where they have some lapses, where we're not used to seeing this from Utah, but I think this will be another postseason year for Utah, but I'm not buying them yet to go win the league, but we shall see. Number 7, Iowa State. Number 6, I've got BYU. A couple of weeks ago, months ago, I would have said BYU maybe 2 or 3. And, Jake Retzlaff leaving, reportedly to the transfer portal, I think throws a little bit of a wrench in that. And because you still got to figure that quarterback position out. Still, as I talked about earlier, they can still be a very good team this year. But has this summer been so hectic and chaotic that it leaves BYU in a footing where they don't maximize their potential this year? I still think it's a really good team, and I think this defense is going to be outstanding for BYU this year. Glasgow and Kelly are an incredible duo, and Sialia Serra at the Mike linebacker spot, they will be excellent. I think that defense is going to be really good. Number 5, we got Kansas State. listening to Avery Johnson today, he noted that he's playing more above 200 pounds, which is noteworthy because very lean quarterback. But Avery Johnson, I think they're the team that you pencil in every year. They get the benefit of 8 to 9 wins. Not playoff good every year, but 8 to 9 wins. Like, they're an annual team that always has a handful of weeks in the top 25. It's just breaking through and winning the biggest prize. Now, they've won the Big 12 in 2022. But just matter of getting back there. But with Chris Kleiman teams that they're going to be very consistent. They're going to be in the mix. I just don't know if they're going to be the top team in the league. Number 4, Baylor. Really like Baylor this season. Favorable schedule, too. I think in the Big 12, they got a really good non-conference slate that can make some statements and make some noise for the league at large. Give me Baylor. Number 3, Arizona State. Defending champ, seeing Kenny Dillingham. It's always kind of surreal to see a coach that's younger than me out there because I've always viewed myself as a young guy. But, Father Time, it sneaks up on everyone. And Kenny Dillingham is just a great fit, I think, at Arizona State. He's going to be an outstanding fit. I think he's going to do great things at that program. And the thing is, he's an alum. Like, he's at a place that he loves. And I'd like to think that he stays there long term and never bats an eye about leaving. But can Arizona State avoid, like BYU, can they avoid the classic Big 12 letdown season? Big year and then dip instantly. Can they avoid that? Really curious to see because Arizona State historically has kind of been that. When you attach that sleeping giant tagline to ASU, 96 Rose Bowl, 97, a little bit of a dud. BYU played that 97 team. 98, they were preseason top 25. Kind of average. There weren't many Rose Bowls. I think there were only 2 for ASU when they were in the Pac, 12. But this is the Big 12, and they've been a great fit in the league. And they won the Commissioner's Cup. Like, they're an athletic department that's winning big. And, can they continue that? I'm very curious to see. But I got ASU in the top 3. They've got so much experience returning. Scadaboo's gone, sure. But Sam Levitt's going to be really good. I think that returning experience, they got some tough road games, though, tough games, but I think ASU finishes in the top 3. Number 2, TCU. Tough schedule, some gauntlet road games for the Horned Frogs, but I love TCU's personnel. And I just feel like they're due for a big breakout year. Last year they were 9-4. Didn't play any top 25 teams. And I think that's what caused them to get slept on quite a bit. But Josh Hoover is excellent. The QB play, again, in this league is really good. And I'm buying TCU. And then number 1, I'm going Texas Tech. Hook 'em. There was a reporter that covers Texas Tech on one of the recruiting websites, and he says his outlet, and then Joey McGuire goes, wreck 'em. I love that. I thought that was awesome. Joey McGuire is just a cool, legit dude. Like, just so kind. And it's easy to see why recruits, his team, love him. The guy's just so likable. And when you talk about cultures and programs, like, players want to play for coaches they like. And it helps when you got money, too. And they're also leaning into it. They're not shying away from, hey, we're leaning in. We're doing everything above board, but, like, we're leaning in. We want to go win. Baron Morin's talking about how he wants to be the Texas quarterback known as the guy that led Texas Tech to a national championship. Like, I like the vibes around Tech. A lot of pressure, a lot of expectations, but I think they're going to deliver. And they got a very favorable schedule. I think it sets up very well for them. It's very manageable, at least what we know right now. I got them going 11-1, going to the Big 12 title game and winning that thing and getting to the playoff. We'll see if Brett Yormark's, feelings that this league produces multiple bids materializes. That's going to be a real interesting piece in the 12-team playoff this year. But that's my preseason poll, if I had one, for the Big 12 Conference in 2025. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Cougar Tracks podcast. We'll have more coverage from day 2. The other 8 teams in the conference going to take center stage, Utah being one of them as well. We'll have more coverage on KSLSports.com.